Hey everyone, welcome back. This is a very long one, and all my videos moving forward are gonna be long, so I hope you enjoy all these stories. There's a lot of dark stories in this video. I recommend checking the timestamps for certain stories that you might not want to hear, ranging from sexual assault to murder. If you're all ready, let's go ahead and get started. And remember to always stay hungry. The Smiling Man. I'm aware that the title sounds like a horror movie or creepypasta, and if I hadn't lived it, I would think it was. This is one of many stories that I have from working the night shift at a laundromat in a bad area, and it's definitely the freakiest. So for context, my mom took a job years ago at a local laundromat because we knew the owner and needed the extra money. I was around 10 when she got the job, and she allowed me to come with her because she would give me a little allowance for helping her do small tasks. I ended up going with her every night for years. And as I got older, I mainly went to make sure my mom was safe because I was worried about her. We regularly dealt with angry customers refusing to leave, most of which were drunk or high, and we had to call the police a few times. My mom was always worried about me tagging along, but I insisted. And to this day, I still can't say I regret it. A lot of good came out of it, mainly the work experience, and that made up for how intense it could be. I have a lot of interesting stories from that time, but this one takes the cake for the most horrifying, and it took place when I was about 12. Being the young and dumb kid that I was, I designated myself the job of chasing people off when it was closing time. We would have people parking behind the building pretty regularly, so I would walk to the side of the building and start yelling that they were now trespassing and I'd call the cops if they didn't leave. I feel that this is important to bring up because I now realize that I let any shady person hanging around the building at night know of my presence, and that's a dangerous thing to do when you're a 12-year-old girl. I was blissfully unaware that anything could happen to me, until one night when we showed up to find that the door lock had been broken. My mom had unlocked the building that morning, so it wasn't like this was a break-in attempt since it had been unlocked all day. We were a bit shaken up, but my mom texted her boss to let him know about it, and just told me to tell her if I saw anyone pull up. After about 30 minutes, I finished my few tasks and sat down to draw on my sketchbook. I had barely been set down for a few minutes when I had heard the door swing open, which startled me because normally people just knock when they see the very obvious closed sign. My mom noticed it too and yelled out that we were closed. I heard an older man's voice respond, explaining that he had just come in to use our drink machine. We normally let people in to use our snack and drink machines, so my mom told him he had a few minutes and went back into the closet to grab something. I was sitting about 7 feet away from the drink machine, so I heard him walk up but didn't really pay much attention to him. I continued to draw until I started getting the feeling that someone was watching me. And I realized that I didn't hear this guy put any money in the drink machine. I nervously glanced to my left, and I saw a tall man in his mid-60s staring straight at me with a big smile on his face. I jumped a little, but forced an awkward smile back at him, and directed my attention back to drawing. As soon as I did this, I heard what sounded like shuffling, and when I looked over again, he was closer. I didn't know what to do, so I tried just to not look at him. But every time I would look away, he would shuffle closer. His body was still facing the drink machine, but his neck was craned in my direction, and he wouldn't stop smiling and staring. I began shaking and panicking, and my eyes were darting back and forth between him and the closet door while I tried to plan a fast escape. I went to reach for my knife in my bag because I couldn't even imagine this man's intentions, and quickly realized that it was not there. I had left my knife at home when I needed it the most, and I was petrified. I decided to just stare back at him despite being terrified and trembling violently, and after what felt like an eternity, he suddenly broke eye contact and yelled at my mom to have a good night before turning around and walking out. Relief hit me instantly, and I tried to calm myself down after what had just happened. I thought I was finally safe, and started to get up to go splash some water on my face, when I saw him sit down on the bench outside. Panic and dread hit me like a brick, and I sprinted into the closet to hide. I filled my mom in on everything, and she told me to run to the car and she'd get between me and him and then pepper spray him if needed. I did as she told me and ran to the car, and as I passed him, he stood up and began walking toward the car. My mom yelled at him to get away from her car, and his reaction was to try to calmly start a conversation about the make and model of her car, all while staring at me. She ignored him, hopped in the car, locked us in, and started backing up as quickly as she could. I dug down in my seat, but I could still see him standing there, and I know he could see me because I watched as he lifted his hand and then waved me goodbye before walking around to the back of the building and disappearing into the darkness. I felt sick. I couldn't sleep that night, and I never dared set foot anywhere near the back of the building again. So I guess that was a lesson learned. My online stalker. Disclaimer: always report incidents like this to trusted adults and authorities immediately. Please do not handle similar situations the way that I did. It began this summer before I entered high school in 2018 with just innocent messages on Facebook. I never understood why he continued to message me. After a couple of days of him texting 6 to 7 times in a row without a reply, he stated that he was 26 from my hometown but stationed elsewhere in the army, and he had plans to find a young wife to cherish. I made it clear that I was 14 and uninterested, that I blocked his account. The next day he made another account calling me baby girl and telling me that I was what he wanted in a wife. This wasn't the first time I had to deal with an older man interested in me. Naively, I muted the chat and moved on with my life. I stopped thinking about him, enjoyed my summer, and then started high school. Everything was going great until the packages started to arrive. First, a necklace with his name on it, then one shaped like a heart. They had receipts and were expensive. I was terrified that he had found my address, so I showed my mom everything. My mom tried to return the gifts. Not sure why that was her reaction, but he refused. Showing my mom the messages was the first time that I'd actually ever read any of them. They were weird, and some were about eloping with me when I turned 16. My mom found out that he went to high school with both of my older siblings. My sister recalled him as a weird anime nerd, and he was always friendly towards my brother, also an anime nerd. I ended up blocking a few more accounts and tried to ignore what I thought wasn't that serious of a situation. After this, we never spoke of him again. One afternoon in November of my freshman year, I was in gym class with friends when I had received a call with no ID. My friends told me to pick up, thinking it was a telemarketer or spam that we could mess with. We all heard something along the lines of, "Hey, I'm waiting outside of gym for you whenever you get done with class." We thought it was just another friend pranking us, laughed, and just moved on. After class, I had a weird gut feeling and tried leaving through the visitor doors, but the coach told me it wasn't permitted. I walked out, and there he was. He grabbed my throat, jammed his entire mouth against mine, and told me he was disappointed I wasn't wearing the jewelry he got me, then walked away. I sprinted to my theater teacher, the only teacher I trusted, and cried for the rest of the day until convincing my brother to pick me up. I blamed the tears on the recent passing of my grandpa. I kept receiving CDs, mixtapes, songs that he wrote about me, as well as bracelets and cards until COVID began. But I never saw him in person again after that day. The Donut Shop Creeper. I just read another user story about the smiling man at the laundromat, and it instantly transported me back to a similar high school memory. I was about 15 or 16, and my older brother that went to the same high school as me would drive us to school most days of the week when our parents stopped wanting to get up early since we both had zero period that began at 7 a.m. One day on the way to school, we had stopped at a donut shop that was in sort of a remote part of town on a stretch of highway. It was still kind of dark outside before 6:30 a.m. This was in the late 90s or early 2000s, before it was common for teenagers to have their own cell phones, so I didn't have a way to call or text. This shop had nothing around it except trees and a stretch of empty land. The parking lot was too big for how small this place was. He didn't park us in the very front spot by the door, and to this day I have no idea why he didn't. He parked about a row and a half from the front and walked in. No one was at the counter, so I watched him wait for service. While he was waiting, my eyes wandered and panned suddenly to a man's face staring daggers at me from one of the tables in the shop. It was very startling. Like in movies when they look through binoculars and see someone staring at them through the scope. I immediately looked away and down because it freaked me out. At first, I thought maybe the man was tired and was just kinda spacing out because of how early it was. But I felt his eyes on me after a few minutes, and although I fought myself to look up, I glanced up, and he had a creepy smile on his face. He had short bobbed hair like a dude would have had in the 70s. I looked at my brother and it felt like an eternity as he picked the donuts. He had turned around once and I tried to get his attention, but he turned back around to keep choosing. When my brother was talking to the cashier, I noticed the man at the table get up. He never took his eyes off me, and I remember my heart beating hard in my chest as I looked down since I couldn't think of anything else to do. I hoped he would just walk away, but out of the corner of my eye, I noticed he was approaching the truck. My first thought was to reach over and honk the horn as loud as I could, but he was already about one stride away from the driver's side, and I had then noticed the door had an auto locked. It was the kind that had the little pop-up button lock. I only had seconds to choose to lock the door or honk the horn, so I practically leaped over and remember slapping down on the lock button. Not but 2 or 3 seconds later, the man pulled on the door handle. He turned to walk away, but then turned again and tried to pull harder. I then honked the horn to get attention, but I saw my brother had walked to the other side of the counter out of view. After I honked a second time, the guy walked off past the car across the street where it was a bit wooded before the highway resumed. When my brother came back, he asked why I was honking and being impatient because it was still early and we wouldn't even be late. After I told him some creep tried to get in, he drove around the area, but no one was around since it had been like 5 more minutes before he got to the car. Encounter with a killer. I live in Pennsylvania just outside Philly, and the following happened just a few years ago. It was a late November evening and my wife and I were craving hot wings. A quick search brought up a new joint in Royalsford, Pennsylvania that had just opened. I put in an online order and zip on by. The man behind the counter, a middle-aged African-American gentleman with a jovial disposition and a hearty laugh. We talked about the Eagles while he got my food ready. I thanked him and left. A few months later, he's on the news for killing his business partner, apparently over a money dispute. She had funds and he wanted them for a new location, but she refused. He buried her out in an industrial area and parked her car elsewhere. The police found evidence of him being in her car, several failed attempts at access to her Cash App and Venmo account, evidence of a struggle in her home, And before long, well, Chicken Wing Guy was arrested, tried and convicted of his business partner's murder. I didn't connect it until later that this was the same guy after an article named the business he owned. The very restaurant I got wings at those few months prior. The wings weren't all that good either that I recall. Don't ever tell strangers you're traveling alone. Now that I, a 23-year-old female, am back from Germany, I've had some time to think over the events of my trip. But it's hard to think positively considering what happened to me the last night in Stuttgart, and I'd like a place to talk about it. I'd spent about 2 weeks traveling Germany for the Euros, and considering how many fellow Scotland fans were over for the games, I never felt completely alone, despite being a solo traveler in a foreign country. I guess I became too naive in how I trusted the older groups of Scots who'd buy me drinks and chat with me all night about where they're from, who they knew. Just typical Scottish chats. I let my guard down. That last night in Stuttgart happened like most other nights in Germany. I'd be by myself and would get noticed by a group of older men or women who'd inquire as to who I was with. When they heard I was alone, they'd remark at how brave I was as a good-looking lassie, being here all by myself. I'd then be integrated in the group, drink with them, celebrate with them, and that night cry with them after Scotland lost. Determined to enjoy my last night, I said goodbye to my new friends and donned on a short white dress draped in my Scotland flag and went out looking for a good place to drink and dance with strangers I'd never meet again. I met a few people that night, but it was while I was alone that I met him. "That bag's bigger than you are," I heard as a jolly older man wandered over to me. It was true. I had my rucksack with me that night. "Where's your boyfriend to carry it for you?" "Not sure yet. Still deciding if he's going to be German or Scottish," I quipped back with a smile. Most of my interactions would start this way, with a friendly interaction resulting in an offer to come drink with their group. And after offering to take me to a nearby Irish pub to drink with him and his family, I graciously accepted and we began walking. He was over-exaggerating how incredible he thought I was for doing this alone, bowing to me and excitedly telling passers-by how I was by myself and how brave it was. I would smile awkwardly and change the subject. I wish I could say alarm bells were ringing, but they weren't. After all, he was just a wee Scottish grandpa, one of the many I'd met that night. He began prodding me if I had somewhere to sleep tonight, remarking how they had a room in their hotel if need be. "I wouldn't force myself on you or anything." I froze. It was so unexpected. I truly looked at him for the first time since I'd met him. He was a relatively short man, taller than me with a larger build and wrinkles to match the white hair that was poking out from underneath his Scotland cap. He began quickly explaining how he knew I'd be cautious about that sort of thing, being a smart girl, that I could trust him, but again reiterated that he wouldn't force himself on me. I laughed nervously, as all the beer I drank earlier seemed to drain from my body, and I began taking in my surroundings. Where did you say your family were again? Just in an Irish pub up this hill. So like I was saying, I didn't really pay much attention to him. We were still on the populated main street of Stuttgart, but the numbers were dwindling the further we went. My ears pinged an alert to my brain, signaling I had just missed something important or horrifying. So I mustered up a smile and politely asked, "What did you say? Sorry." "That I'm vegetarian because I killed my 44th man in a vegetable field." "Oh, I've been deployed in loads of countries. The first 6 lives I took were in Ireland." My blood ran cold. I'm a descendant of Irish immigrants who fled to Scotland to escape the brutality of the Troubles in Ireland. Did this man kill my family? Killed 12 in Iraq. I could only listen to parts of his ramblings as I began desperately planning my escape, locking eyes with every person that walked past. There weren't many. We had almost reached the top of the main street now. "Why are you so tense all of a sudden?" The words brought me back to the conversation. "You know, I can read you like a book. I'm doing this all for you, see? I want to protect you. And Molly, I can guarantee you right now you don't realize how much danger you're actually in." I felt a gentle tap on my shoulder, spinning around to see a young German man smiling at me. He motioned to my flag. "I love Scotland. Is there anywhere to eat around here?" I blurted out, staring at him, praying I'd turn around and the old man would be gone. Brief confusion crossed the German's face before the old man began rapidly jumbling up the sentence. "Sprechen Sie Deutsch?" in an attempt to sound as if he was speaking German. "Essen," I whispered. The young man pointed in the direction we had just walked from. "There's a McDonald's down there." I turned back to the old man, whose look I could only describe as emotionless, as if he was staring through me like I was no longer there. I felt another cold shiver before smiling. "I'm gonna go grab something to eat, but I'll meet you in the Irish pub later." As if snapping back to his jolly self, the man quipped, "Now don't be like that. I'm off to a rave just now. I'm playing at it. You don't want to miss it." "I'll catch you later." I smiled. The man's face again dropped into a blank stare before he turned and walked off. I think the German man called after me, but I didn't hear him. I kept my head down and walked wherever my feet wanted to take me. I couldn't think, only walk. I don't know how I got to the train station nor how I got to the hostel. There were no Irish pubs in Stuttgart, or at least not in that direction. So I guess I'm gonna end my story with this. To all solo female travelers, never ever say you're traveling alone. The Goblin Mask. I've been lurking on this sub for a while, and really enjoy reading people's experiences. I recalled a story of my own from my childhood I had mostly forgotten. Here it is. I'm a 36-year-old male, and my parents divorced when I was around 4 to 5 years old. During and after the divorce, my brother, who we'll call Chris, my mom and I moved into a small 2-bedroom apartment townhouse. Now, this is not the nice townhouse you may imagine. It wasn't a complete shithole per se, but they were older, built in the 60s, and this was the 1990s, and in a rougher part of town. Something a single mother with 2 kids could swing. The layout of the apartment is important to the story, so bear with me. When you walk in the front door, the kitchen is immediately to your left, and there's a short entrance hallway in front of you. The kitchen has an open countertop area that looks into the dining spot for a table and a split-level living room and den area that also had sliding glass doors leading to the backyard. There was a playground there. And the hallway entrance again, on the right is a staircase leading up to my mom's and my brother's rooms. One day after school, my brother and I were playing out in the backyard on the playground, doing our kid stuff, when my mom told us that she wanted to go check the mail. The mailboxes of the apartments are located at the front entrance, which is on the opposite side of the complex from us. Naturally, me being 5 and Chris 9, my mom didn't want to leave us alone, especially since it was about dark outside. We came inside and got ready to leave. On the way out, I remember my mom asking Chris if he had closed and locked the sliding glass door. Chris said he had. Cut to where we're back from the mailroom. It's maybe been about 20 to 30 minutes max. It's hard to recall fully. But my mom unlocks the apartment door, and I'm lingering in the car for some reason or another. Chris doesn't notice I'm not in the apartment yet, and on the stairs leading to the bedrooms on the right, he sees someone's feet at the top of the landing, as if someone were running to hide. Thinking they're me, he doesn't think something's off. Chris goes to the kitchen, and I actually go upstairs directly into our bedroom to get ready for the bed and bath in the bathroom. My mom is at the table in the dining area near the split-level living area downstairs. While I'm completely clueless getting ready for bed in the bathroom, Chris from downstairs keeps hearing someone walking around in my mom's bedroom. Now, I had a bad habit when I was this age of going through people's stuff. Not maliciously. I was barely 5, just curious, whatever. And Chris, thinking I'm being a nosy bastard going through all of her mom's jewelry, runs upstairs to catch me in the act and get me in trouble. Well, Chris runs up the stairs, sprints across the hall to my mom's bedroom, and throws himself stomach first onto the bed. When he looks up, he sees a tall, slender man with a bright green goblin latex Halloween mask on, and he's holding up a large knife that he swiped from the kitchen. My brother sits silently in shock as the man in the goblin mask raises one finger to the mouth, indicating for him to be quiet. And in true form for my brother, he screamed bloody murder for our mom. Now, I have heard things going on, but I have no idea and I'm not aware of what's happening. I've gotten my big oversized sleeve shirt and I'm going downstairs to have a glass of milk before bed. When Chris screamed, the man ran downstairs and encountered my mom, who immediately jumped into action. Our baseball gear was in the living room, and my mom grabbed a bat and started fighting this man in our house while he was taking swipes at her with a knife. I first noticed what was happening when I've come downstairs to the kitchen, pulled up a step stool to reach the counter and pour a glass of milk. And that's when I see over the bar the guy pushes my mom off the steps into the split-level living room, landing on her back. She starts swinging the bat wildly, trying to make any contact with it, and she does. I'm glued to this image, truly frozen in place. Not scared, just so young that you can't fully process what you're seeing. The man finally runs toward the front door, which is right by the kitchen. I'm mid-pouring my glass of milk, frozen. Milk continuing to spill out all over the counter and floor. He stops and turns directly to me, and in that green goblin mask with the knife, screams a primal deep sound of rage and frustration, and then slams the door so hard the whole place shakes. I continued standing on my stool, pouring my milk everywhere, frozen for, I don't know, what could have been a second, but felt so long. I don't remember what happened after that, but all of the parts I've relayed are very clear to me. Moral of the story: lock your doors, and don't just assume that you did. Actually do it. The Crazy Ex. Hello everyone. I'm very new to posting here, so please bear with me. I wanted to share my story that has occurred over the past 5 years. The story is about me, currently 20 years old, and my stalker ex, who's 23. The start of our relationship. 2019 to 2021, 5 years ago, I met my ex. I'll call him Alex for my own safety. In early to mid-2019, I came across Alex's profile on Instagram, and I recognized him as a student who attended the same high school as me. I always thought he was attractive, so I followed him on Instagram, and to my surprise, he actually responded to one of my stories. We started messaging on Instagram back and forth, and then both of us quickly found out that we liked each other. We started calling each other and sleeping on the phone. One night while I fell asleep on the phone with Alex, I heard his voice coming from the phone, whispering something like, "I would totally R-word you," and things along that manner. I thought I was just hearing things, so I brushed it off and thought I was just dreaming. Eventually, me and him started dating and going on dates. Everything was going pretty well, except for the fact that when he would kiss me, he would bite me extremely hard, to the point that it would make me bleed. I told him multiple times not to do it, but he would always continue. A couple of months into dating, a girl had made a video on Instagram claiming he was a cheater, but he denied it to me that he even knew this girl, and I believed him. 10 months of dating went by, and a friend sent me a screenshot of him being active on Tinder. I immediately broke up with him after that. A couple of months later, I had started dating someone new. During this relationship with my new partner, Alex would blow up my phone with messages and calls. I decided to block him. He then started driving past my house every single day. At this point, I had my first job, and he would eventually show up there too. I even moved jobs and he found me there as well. Now, getting back together, which was 2021 to 2023, the situation eventually died down. Randomly out of the blue, I get a flower delivery of pink roses. It had Alex's name on the card attached, but nothing written. Being the stupid 17 to 18-year-old senior I was in high school, I actually unblocked him and thanked him. He asked to hang out, and I willingly went to hang out with him soon after we started texting. My 17-year-old self thought it was cool to be dating a hot, well-known older boy, so I eventually fell back into Alex. After a couple of times of hanging out, we had started dating again. I eventually lost my V card to Alex, and we started regularly sleeping with each other. One day he texted me saying he had a surprise for me. Then he sent me an iCloud file. I opened the file, and it was a video of us having sex. I had no idea he recorded us having sex. I couldn't even consent. I was 17 at the time and he was 20. Again, stupid 17-year-old me stayed with him regardless of the red flags. Eventually our relationship became sexually and physically abusive. One night he sexually assaulted me while intoxicated and unconscious, and left bruising on my head and abdomen. A couple of days after that, I decided enough was enough, and I broke up with him. Now for the stalking. This was around 2023 to 2024. Immediately following the breakup, he would constantly text and call me. He would beg for me to see him. I kept denying, but he kept going. He would threaten to come into my house in the middle of the night while I was asleep. This happened for a couple of months. During this time, I met someone new and we started dating. I was having trouble with my mom, and my new partner asked me to move in with him. Somehow Alex found out where me and my new partner were living, so he started showing up at our place. We documented everything from our cameras, and ended up filing a restraining order against Alex. We got granted a temporary order until our hearing. Our hearing day came, and the judge extended the temporary order to let things cool down for 6 months. And if he breaks the order, the judge will grant a long-term order at the next hearing. Within days of extending the temp order, Alex violated it by parking in front of my house on multiple occasions. I called the cops multiple times, but never even gave him a warning. One day while I was working, I got a call from my local police department that Alex tried purchasing a firearm, which violates our order. They just wanted him not to do it again, and had to let me know for my safety. Obviously, knowing your crazy ex has tried purchasing a firearm is crazy in itself. The following days, he would follow me to work and stand in front of my boyfriend's truck in the early hours of the morning. This is the most current and fleeing. In 2024, He would start tailgating me on my way to work or swerve in front of me in his car. Me and my boyfriend moved somewhere else, but still in the same city. Somehow Alex still managed to find us. My boyfriend decided that if the cops weren't going to help us, then we would need to leave the state. We ended up packing up everything in the middle of the night and driving a state over to where my boyfriend's family lives. I've been here for about 2 months. Me and my boyfriend found good jobs, and we plan on leasing our own apartment soon. It's been peaceful for the most part. However, I still hear about what Alex does back home. He still tells everyone that we're still together, and he even posts pictures of me on his Instagram. My story is still ongoing. The High School Stalker. This incident happened back when I was a sophomore in high school. I'm now a 27-year-old female, but I would like to keep myself anonymous for the sake of the story for reasons you'll understand. Our school was notorious for getting transfer students, so I didn't pay much mind when 2 new students arrived at the beginning of that year. They were twins who, for this story, I will call David and Kyle. Right from the start, everyone could tell that there was something off about these two. They kept to themselves, would whisper everything, and were always glaring at everyone, teachers and students alike. Have you ever met someone who gave off the vibe that they were going to be a serial killer one day? Yeah, that was these two. Maybe a couple of months into the school year, I noticed that one of the twins, Kyle, seemed to be paying more attention to me than usual. He would hover by my locker, sit closer to me in the cafeteria, and would always be staring at me whenever he thought that I wouldn't notice. Everything seemed to take a turn when my best friend thought it would be funny to ask Kyle to give me a hug while we were eating lunch. Even though I was clearly uncomfortable, my friend did not let up, and I ended up getting that incredibly awkward hug. From that day forward, things started to get much worse. As the weeks went by, the stalking got worse, and I was starting to feel incredibly paranoid. Even a couple of my teachers noticed what was happening and tried their best to keep me as far away from Kyle as they could. I attended a very religious private school, and that came with the typical misogyny and unfair treatment. Girls were suspended for wearing tank tops, having hair above their shoulders, and I even saw a couple of girls get expelled for being pregnant. But as they always said, boys will be boys. Anyway, homecoming was coming up, and all of us were getting excited about our dates and picking out our dresses for the dance. I decided to go with my best friend because neither of us wanted to deal with finding a date. I don't know why I didn't see this coming, but Kyle stopped me in front of the cafeteria one day. He got on one knee with a rose and asked me to be his date for homecoming. Thank God my best friend was there when he asked, and then informed him that we would be going together so I didn't have to deliver an awkward rejection. Kyle said nothing. He just got up and walked off without looking at anyone. I felt terrible. As creepy as he was, I never wanted to hurt anyone's feelings. The stalking seemed to die down for a few days, which I was thankful for. I thought that maybe he finally got the hint and I wouldn't have to worry about all this anymore. I was very wrong. Now, instead of trying to talk to me or sit close to me, he began filming me using his phone. Every time I would look over, I could see the red line on his phone, and it was always pointed towards me. I never even had the thought to bring this to the attention of a teacher, because what would they even do? Boys will be boys after all, right? It was the Friday night of homecoming. There was the typical football game, and I was a cheerleader. Kyle and David had never been to a football game before, and I was extremely thankful for that. But tonight, to my horror, I looked up at the audience and saw Kyle in the stands, giving me that same creepy stare and holding up his phone with that same red light. He wasn't even trying to hide it. Even my coach noticed and he escorted me off the field and to my car after the game, which I am thankful for, don't get me wrong. Still, this was the third adult that had seen him do this, and no one stepped up to help me. I felt stuck. I was so excited to go home that night and be somewhere that I felt safe. How wrong I was. After eating dinner and taking a quick shower, I finally got to sleep after a stressful day. I woke up in the morning to the creepiest voicemail I have ever received. I was horrified. I have no idea how Kyle even got my number. The voicemail went something like this. Hey, it's Kyle. I just wanted to say great job last night. I know I haven't been to any of your games, but I'm glad that I got to see you at this one, and I'll be coming to every single game from now on. If you ever want to talk to me, I can only call when my parents are gone on Saturday mornings, because I'm not allowed to talk to girls on the phone. Anyway, I just wanted to say great job again, and thank you for the amazing videos I was able to get. Okay, see you at the next game. Bye. I didn't even know what to do. I was too afraid to tell my parents, as they had the same mentality as the authorities at the school. Instead, I showed the voicemail to my senior friends on the following Monday to get their thoughts about it. They all just thought it was hilarious and said that he probably meant no harm. Everyone around me thought this whole situation was so funny that I tried to do the same despite the growing concern. Then one day, it was all over. No more stalking. No more videos. No more creepy stares. The twins just disappeared. One day in the middle of the year, they just didn't come back to school, and they were never seen again. No one had any answers as to why. No trace of them could be found online, and since they kept to themselves, no one had contact with them or their family. It was like they were never there, except for me. I knew they were there, and it caused me trust issues for many years to come, and even to this day, I don't 100% trust anyone that I don't really know. To the creepy twins, especially Kyle, I really hope that you didn't become the serial killers everyone thought you would be. The psychotic bully. This took place way back when I was in middle school. I admit I was a total nerd. Braces, glasses, special shoes, the whole 9 yards. I wasn't bullied too badly, and everybody at school knew each other from previous grades, so I actually had a lot of good friends. My last year of middle school, however, I was bullied mercilessly by a new kid. He was huge compared to the rest of the students in that grade. Some people said he had even been held back a few years. Others said his whole family was full of wrestlers and they were all just that big. I tried keeping my head down, ignoring his cruel jokes and rallying others to join him. It seemed the more I ignored his verbal bullying, the more physical things started to get. All my friends seemed to turn on me, joking and laughing at me behind my back. Those that still hung out with me started to ignore me, probably because they didn't want to face the new kid's wrath. Many times throughout the day, he would sneakily attack me, kicking out my legs when my hands were full, slamming me into lockers, stealing my backpack and stuffing it into the toilets. Every time an incident occurred, I told the front office, or I told a hall duty person, but all they did was make an incident report, and the bullying continued. I just kept telling myself, the year's almost over. I won't have to deal with this much longer. I had learned how to get around the school without running into the bully. But this turned me into a hermit. I no longer really had friends. I spent most of my time either at the library or computer lab by myself. And to keep the bully and his minions from torturing me, I asked all of my teachers if I could sit at the front of the class closest to the door. Eventually the bullying took a turn for the worse. For a few months I hadn't had to deal with the constant bullying, and unfortunately, I let my guard down. I had to use the restroom really badly, and had no choice but to use the main restroom in the busiest part of the school. The bathroom was busy, so I used the last urinal at the end. As I was relieving myself, I could hear people coming and going from the bathroom, until I noticed I didn't hear anybody anymore. As I began to turn my head to see where everybody had gone, a massive hand had grabbed the back of my head and slammed my face into the tile wall. Instantly I felt my nose gush blood, and my teeth bit into my lip, as my head rolled back and my glasses fell off my face. My glasses had been cracked right on the bridge. As I watched them slowly fall to the floor, I was then kicked in the back into the urinal. The flushing mechanism struck me in the neck and chin, splitting open my chin. I was dazed and wobbling. The bully then spun me around and then threw me into the wall. I slowly slid to the ground with my legs sprawled out. He then started laughing and pointing at me, saying I pissed myself. Of course my pants were wet from being slammed into the urinal. So was my shirt. But my shirt was wet from a mix of blood, urinal water, and maybe even piss. He just stood there laughing as if he just heard the best joke ever. I realized at that moment that nobody had left the bathroom. Everybody was just standing there staring at me, mouths wide open looking at the bloody carnage on the floor that was me. The realization and embarrassment of everybody staring at me snapped me back into reality. As the bully was bent over laughing, I quickly scrambled to my feet defensively. I swung my backpack around to my chest, partially to cover myself in my drenched clothes, and partially to protect myself from the bully. Once he noticed I was on my feet, he stopped laughing. Blood was dripping down my nose and onto my backpack. The bully looked at me up and down. He then turned his head to the other kids in the bathroom and then said, "Look at this guy. He takes a lick and just keeps on ticking." Then he looks back at me. "You think you're pretty tough, don't you? You think you're tougher than me?" I didn't say anything. I didn't think anything I said would help the situation. "Hey!" he screamed at me, and I jumped. He laughed at me again. "Oh, I thought you were a big old tough guy. You're just a scaredy cat. Hey, look at this guy. He's so scared he's pissing himself." As his head was turned, I thought maybe I could rush by him or maybe he'd just let me go. He stuck his arm out, stopping me. "Did I say you could leave?" I looked at the other kids in the bathroom, praying that somebody would at least get help. As he slammed me back against the wall with one arm, I could hear the bathroom door open, and then people started scouring out. In my head, I thought, yes, finally somebody is going to get help. I just have to deal with this asshole for a bit longer. But when I looked at the bully, his eyes seemed to change. There was nothing in those eyes. In my head, I thought, this guy's going to kill me. He doesn't care. He's going to kill me and nobody will even say anything because they're too scared of him. He kicked at me and hit my backpack, pushing me against the wall again. I realized there was now nobody in the bathroom. Everybody had left except me and the bully. Nobody would have stopped him from killing me anyways. He kept kicking in my backpack and pushing me against the wall over and over. I thought he must be getting tired, and any minute now a teacher or yard duty person will come through the door. But I also realized that at the same time with this guy who up until this moment I thought was just a student, a new kid, a bully was going to kill me. Just then, something inside me changed. I was never really a timid person or shy or meek. But the more I'd gotten bullied, I started doing just those things. I hadn't really realized all that this bully had taken from me. I don't know if it was fight or flight, adrenaline or what, but I pushed my backpack in front of me and started charging the bully. He threw a fist right into my face and probably broke my nose or even worse, but my momentum carried me, and using my backpack as a battering ram slammed into the bully, and we both toppled onto the floor. I tried pushing myself up off my backpack, but as I tried, the bully kept punching me in my lower side and side of my chest. The punches didn't really hurt, but it kept me from getting my feet from under me. Every time I pushed myself up and off my backpack and bully, I kept pushing myself down as hard as I could, hoping it would be enough to hurt him so I could get away. The bully grabbed my arm, and in one swift move flipped me over so that now I was on my back and he was on top of me. He began to cock his arm back, so I covered my face. The punch landed on my ribs, and as I instinctively moved to protect my ribs, he punched me on the side of my face. I was in a losing battle. I could taste the blood in my mouth, and every blow to my face and ribs sent a convulsion throughout my body. I started throwing my hands into his face. Not really able to get a good hit, but distracting him enough that he was now defending himself. The bully kept trying to grab my hands and pin my arms, but my arms were covered in blood and sweat and probably piss, which made it difficult for him to pin my arms. Wildly swinging at him, the bully simply sat back while still on top of me, and I could no longer reach him. So I started to thrust my body, trying to throw him off me. Then I felt the pressure of the world slam my throat into the ground and push and squeeze. He was choking me with both hands and pushing down on my throat as hard as he could. I opened my eyes to see the bully. His eyes were now completely glassed over. I knew I was going to die. With my left hand, I tried pushing against his chest just to let a little air into my lungs. And with my right hand, I started digging through the pencil pouch in the front of my backpack. I grabbed what I thought was a pen or pencil and swung it at the bully. I felt it make contact. Maybe too much contact. I tried pulling the pen back, but it was stuck. The bully's hand went limp, and he fell forward but off me. I scrambled away from the bully, but stayed sitting on the ground struggling to breathe. I looked over at the bully to see that I had driven the point of the pen into his neck almost halfway deep. The bully just laid on the ground, and his body started shaking, going into convulsions. I was too tired to move. My whole body hurt. The bathroom floor was covered in blood. My blood. My shirt was soaked in it. The bully kept reaching out his hands. His hands were covered in blood too. My blood. I tried yelling out for help, but only a squeak came out. I could feel the right side of my face start to swell up from the repeated punches, and no matter how I tried to sit on the floor, my back and sides really hurt. So I just sat there, trying to get as much precious air into my lungs as I could, and watched as this bully or would-be killer dragged himself along the bathroom floor. I don't know how much time had passed or if I had passed out, but I realized I was hearing screaming and yelling. The bathroom was now filled with adults, teachers and hall duty people. The bully had dragged himself to the other side of the bathroom away from me, but it stopped there. As some larger hall duty people were checking on him and noticing the pin sticking halfway out of his neck, a gaggle of female teachers were tending to me. One of the teachers I recognized as my last period English teacher. She looked at me and her eyes locked. She looked at my nose and face, and gently tilted my head back to look at my neck. "Jesus," she said under her breath, but audible enough for me to hear. I gave her a little smile, and she told the other teacher to give her some wet paper towel to clean my face. She gently wiped the blood from my cheeks and mouth, being careful around my nose, but it still hurt. She started to wipe the blood from my neck, but it was still too tender, and I pushed her hand away and shook my head. My face was now really swollen, and it looked like I was a squirrel. They tried to lift me to my feet, but the pain in my side was too much. So they left me on the ground and called 911 for both me and the bully. EMS showed up soon after. They hoisted the bully into a stretcher. He was still alive, but twisted into a half-moon shape. The bathroom door opened as they left, and I can hear the gasps and, "Oh wow, whoa damn, what happened to him?" of the students in the hallway. While the EMS were looking over me, poking and prodding and asking me questions that I could only nod and shake my head slowly at. They brought another stretcher for me. But for some reason, I stood up on my own, winching from the pain. But I felt victorious. No, that wasn't the right word. I felt like I had just survived a bear attack, or what I assume a bear attack felt like, and thought the last few feet to the stretcher was like me crawling around and dragging myself out of the woods. I rolled into the stretcher and closed my eyes to the bright fluorescent lights of the hallway. I heard a few of the girls gasping, even crying, probably at the sight of me on the stretcher covered in blood. Now with some more room to work with, the EMS people gently put my neck into a brace. As my head was lifted, I could see a few of my fellow students waving at me, some fist pumping, a few of them whooping and cheering. I didn't feel like I won that fight though. If anything, I cheated. Like I said, I felt like a survivor, not a winner. The gas station weirdo. I would like to begin my story by giving a little bit of context about myself. I'm a 21-year-old woman, and this incident recently took place at my university before my graduation. For the sake of anonymity, I don't want to share the name of my university, but I will say that it's in the Midwest of the United States. I worked at the front desk of my university student center. Since I held a management position there, I was often kept in the loop about lots of different things happening in the building. The student center is open to the public, and I have some pretty funny and weird stories regarding some of the people who came into the building. This story specifically is about someone I never wish to meet again. For the sake of this narration, let's call him Gus. Gus first appeared in our building around December of 2023. He was clearly an old man, tall and lanky with white hair and a beard. He always wore the same all-black outfit, and got from place to place using his bicycle. Gus seemed to be homeless and had a routine of coming into the student center, buying a coffee and a snack, and sleeping most of the day away in one of our more secluded seating areas. Not too long after he first made his appearance, I came in to cover the next shift at the front desk. Another female coworker of mine who had been working the shift before mine asked if I had noticed Gus around our building. After I said yes, she reported to me that he had been acting odd towards her. She claimed that he had asked to borrow a pair of scissors, and when she handed them to him, he made a comment about how sharp they were, and that he hadn't held something this sharp for a while. This obviously made my coworker feel a little concerned, so she reported this concern to our supervisor as well. She got back to us saying our university's police department had already been getting several minor complaints about him reporting similar creepy behavior. However, university police knew that there was not anything criminal about these reports. Within the next month, I continued to see Gus during every single shift that I worked, but he didn't seem to be bothering anyone. Still, various other staff members in the building would come to the desk and ask me if I'd seen him, warning me that he was a creep. University police also seemed to stop by the desk during my shifts, sometimes more than once, to inquire about where he was and if I'd heard anything new about his behavior. Since I was friendly with most of these officers, I inquired further about why everyone was so concerned about him. Although he stared when he walked by me, he never confronted me or acted out of the ordinary. The officer I was speaking to informed me that Gus had recently been released from prison, and that he had committed sex offenses towards minors. They were concerned about his extensive history, and were looking for the first excuse they could find to kick him off campus. As the months went on, this continued. Gus would continue to stare, and I even saw him riding around my neighborhood a few blocks away from my place of work on several occasions. The police continued to monitor him as he got more and more reports about his odd comments and behaviors. Things finally got interesting in early April of 2024. As the weather warmed up, our student center was populated with more and more people, including lots of young college girls dressed in shorts and crop tops. It didn't take long before Gus was caught taking pictures of girls' shorts, and he was put on a trespass warning by university police. What this basically means is that he was not allowed on the property for the duration of the trespass warning. University police came to update me on this during one of my many closing shifts shortly after this occurred. They told me that if I saw Gus, I needed to call them immediately, because he had been part of an incident that earned him yet another trespass warning. The officer would not give me details about this incident, but he would give me some details about the incident that got his initial trespass warning. Apparently, he got close to the girls he was filming by pretending he had dropped something on the ground next to their feet, and then he would get on the floor and begin filming them. When talking to the police, he told them that girls who dress like that deserve and want that kind of attention. Gross, I know. Not even 2 hours into my shift, Gus strolled right past me, staring as usual. I locked into his stare this time around, and I picked up the phone to call university police as soon as he was out of sight. They arrived within minutes and gave him another trespass warning, but this time it would be in place for 2 years. If he broke it, he would be arrested immediately. He saw me talking to the university police as the issue was being sorted, but I wasn't worried because I was sure I wouldn't have to see him again. And while I wish that was the case, it just wasn't true. About 2 weeks later, I stopped at my local gas station in the morning to pick up a coffee. This gas station was only a block away from my place of work. My hair was wet as I had just showered, but I didn't think much of it because I knew this would be a quick trip in and out. As soon as I got back to the freezers that held the iced coffees, my heart dropped as I saw Gus standing right there at the next freezer over. I refused to look at him, but out of the corner of my eye, I saw his whole body turn to face me. My heart immediately began to race, but I was banking on the fact that he might not recognize me outside of my uniform. I grabbed my coffee and quickly jumped into the line at the front of the store. I thought if I kept my back to the creep, he would be less likely to recognize me or try to engage with me. Dread washed over me as I heard him step up behind me, way too close. This dude was not giving me any personal space at all. He reached over my shoulder to pick up some snacks at the display next to my head, pretending to be interested in grabbing something. I could smell his BO and tried to inch up closer to the people in front of me. Suddenly, I heard something drop to the floor behind me. Just like that, Gus's tall body was crouched on the floor next to my ankles, picking up something that he had accidentally dropped. At this point, my fear was turning to anger, and I thought all about the scary stories I'd listened to before that prepared me for a moment like this. As he stood back up, I turned around and locked eyes with him, putting on the bitchiest face I could muster. "Excuse me," I barked at him, and he returned my stare and took one small shuffle backwards. At this point, it was my turn to pay, and as I approached the register, I felt Gus step right back up to where he was, basically against my back. Before I could even react, I heard this creep sniffing in my ear. He was seriously sniffing my wet hair while I was trying to pay for my drink. As I whirled around, the cashier quickly asked me if I knew this man. I loudly shouted, "No, ma'am, I do not know him. I don't know why he's so close to me." The cashier, who was a female smaller than me, was clearly uncomfortable, and she apologized, saying she thought we were together. Gus took 2 large steps backwards as she was saying this, and he had the audacity to